Good afternoon, y'all. We're just going to give everyone a couple minutes to join in. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Research America Alliance discussion. I'm Hussein Okapaji, and I'm thrilled to have you join us on Zoom today. Thank you for being a part of the Research America Alliance. If your organization isn't a member yet, I encourage you to reach out to Kristen Furlong, our Director of Membership and Development. Her email is in the chat for more information about joining our alliance. We're excited to have Quinn Ritchie, Legislative Director to Representative Mike Kelly, with us today. Diverse participation in clinical trials is essential to ensure that all Americans benefit from medical research. Unfortunately, barriers such as travel, time commitments, and financial burdens often deter people from participating. Did you know that payments received by clinical trial participants are taxable? Today, Quinn will help us explore congressional efforts to address these financial deterrents. As always, please type your questions into the Q&A box or chat. We'll address them during the audience Q&A session. Thank you for joining us, Quinn. The floor is yours whenever you're ready.
Thanks, Hussein. And thank you all for having me. It is always a pleasure to talk to the folks who are boots on the ground. We here in DC make policies and often go through rigorous processes of how these policies can be implemented and what that looks like in real time. But hearing from folks like you who truly enact and implement the policies that we craft here in DC, that feedback is a necessary tool in our crafting here in DC. Pleased to join you all and discuss the Harley Jacobson clinical trial participant Income Exemption Act. I do apologize about the long title name. We try to encapsulate, the full scope of the bill, but proud to join you all. A little background on myself. I have been with the Congressman Mike Kelly for 3 years now. Started as staff assistant, and I'm currently his legislative director. I handle all of our healthcare related work as well as some Veterans Affairs work, and oversee his Ways and Means portfolio. The Congressman sits Ways and Means Committee. He is the chairman of the tax subcommittee as well, which has been a great honor in working with Chairman Smith. And the committee has been a pleasure this Congress, and look forward to it in the future. He's been on Ways and Means for at least 10 years now. Our jurisdiction mainly includes healthcare, tax policy, and trade. It is a very established, esteemed committee. So it's a pleasure for my boss and myself to handle this work. So, happy to get into the bill later here. But generally, I think my boss, he is the co-chair of the House Cancer Caucus, co-chair of the Childhood Cancer Caucus here in the House, with some other great members. Cancer research, cancer development, anything in that space we are keen on promoting here in Congress. And it's been that way for 10 years now. And when we were first approached by a group, Moral Health, it was a clinical trial management company based out of Pennsylvania. We were approached about Harley Jacobson's story. Unfortunately, an ALS patient who is no longer with us. In his story of clinical trial participation, what his family experienced throughout that process, the hardships, specifically financial hardships that they faced. And we're presented with an idea around increasing access to those participating in these clinical trials, making it easier for them and their families to take on the financial burden and try to increase diversity within the trial. So happy to get into the bill later, but generally we are looking to increase access to these trials, both for the patients and both for the clinical trial providers. So excited to get it introduced as of, I want to say probably 4 or 5 months ago. Have a great partner in Representative Chrissy Houlahan. They have a great team over there, another Pennsylvania member. Bipartisan legislation, right in our wheelhouse in Ways and Means. So doing the advocacy work here to continue gaining co-sponsors and support. Research America has been a great partner over the last few months since introduction. So again, just honored to join you all and excited to get into the conversation.
Thank you, Quinn. It's really been fantastic that members of Congress are actively working to remove barriers to clinical trial participation, especially for traditionally underrepresented groups. In this chat, we'll actually share a link to another relevant bill, the Clinical Trials Modernization Act, authored by Representatives Larry Bouchon and Raul Ruiz. Again, thank you for the overview, Quinn. I'd like to start a discussion with a few questions before we open it up to the audience. First, I want to note our appreciation for Congressman Kelly, who is, as you've stated, on numerous caucuses related to health and is the co-chair of the Congressional Cancer Caucus, clearly a champion for faster medical progress. What do you see as the greatest impact of the Harley Jacobson Clinical Trial Participant Income Exemption Act?
Yeah, great question, Hussein. I think ultimately my boss and many other members of Congress, at least in the healthcare space, the focus is on the patient, right? The patient experience as they navigate our healthcare system. It is a complex one that unfortunately is complex. Specifically when it comes to clinical trials, families and patients who have to experience the participation in these clinical trials often are some of our most vulnerable, sickest patients, unfortunately, who oftentimes it is a kind of last gasp at determining the disease, the treatment for that disease. And so again, the clinical trial participants are oftentimes very vulnerable. And so, I think the focus here in Congress is on the patient. Each member of Congress serves 740,000 folks in their district, all of which are patients at one point or another, providers, whatever your job is, you at one time are a patient. So trying to better that patient experience specifically for these vulnerable communities, trying to make the financial burden a little lighter on them as they try and navigate the healthcare system and these clinical trial systems. I think also on the provider side, right? Providing providers and clinicians the tools to be able to draw in participants into these markets is critical. You all provide the care and the work on the back end that help these patients and their families as they battle whatever disease they might have. So increasing patient safety, increasing patient participation in these innovative, life-changing trials is the focus here.
I really appreciate that you were able to elucidate a little bit more the consideration that y'all are having for the burden that providers and patients, specifically patients that have to go through clinical trials and are really hanging on to hope for reversing or treating their disease process, that's all part of the consideration behind this bill and some others that Congress members are considering. And I think in your introduction, you mentioned a little bit about Harley Jacobson, and I imagine that that's a big part of the inspiration behind the bill. But maybe you could tell us a little bit more about what motivated its introduction.
Absolutely. The Harley Jacobson story is a touching one. Harley Jacobson was a constituent of Representative Chrissy Houlahan in her district. Unfortunately, was diagnosed with ALS in the middle of his life. And throughout his experience in navigating his treatment, became a clinical trial participant, trying to solve whatever could be done. And I happy to share a link with the full story, but reading about the hardships that him and his family faced, not only at home, not only in hospital settings, but also the financial burden that the family faced participating in programs to try and extend his life and care for his family really stuck out to us. He was a clinical trial participant, as I said, the reimbursement that he received from these clinical trial participations was great. And he and the family very much need that money at a time where, the last thing they should have to think about is the finances of his treatment. Unfortunately, those compensations, reimbursements that he received from the participation are considered gross income tax. So that reimbursement is then taxed on top of the stipend that he received. So ultimately, I don't want to get into the numbers, but the family had to pay thousands of dollars just to participate in these trials. So our whole idea here was lessening that financial burden on him and his family and many other families in this space who, while they're dealing with the hardest times of their lives and figuring out how to navigate treating their family member, also, helping on the financial side where Congress has a say and can step in and say, we recognize that you all are facing something much more important than the financial burden. And so how can we help you out and make sure that you want to participate in these trials, that it's financially, that you're capable of financially participating in the trials, but also just taking away that burden that they face on top of everything else.
Thank you for sharing that, the inspiration behind the bill. I think that helps us understand the approach a lot better. And I'm curious to dig into the details a little bit more. Are there specific conditions or requirements that participants must meet to be eligible for the income exemption provided by the bill?
Absolutely. So the only requirements is that you be a patient or a caregiver of a patient that is enrolled in an approved clinical trial. Happy to share the definition more of approved clinical trial, is that can get complicated here and there. But any approved clinical trial, whether it be phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, or phase 4 of a clinical trial that is conducted in relation to the prevention, detection, or treatment of cancer or other life-threatening disease or condition, all patients and caregivers in that space would be eligible for that exemption of taxation on their gross income that they receive via that reimbursement.
I appreciate that clarification. I'm wondering, during the bill's developmental process, did you or these other coworkers of yours or individuals who are also pioneering this bill, did you guys identify other barriers to clinical trial participation that you believe need addressing? Maybe other areas of focus your boss would like to tackle next?
Absolutely. On top of the financial burden, one issue that we're also trying to solve here is the diversity of folks who are participating in these trials, right? It often comes from a more upper class family who financially can participate, but the other barriers include transportation, include the site where the clinical trial is administered, and oftentimes, we come from a very rural district up in Northwest Pennsylvania. Our hospitals are far and few between, and clinical trial settings and sites are probably even fewer between. So trying to increase the location sites as to where folks can receive this care, super important to us, and that's obviously a big question to tackle, and will take a lot of work into increasing that, but that is certainly on top of the financial side of things, one barrier that we see in diversifying these trials.
Yeah, I think y'all have identified something especially salient there and very pertinent to our alliance. Many of our alliance members are clinical researchers conducting trials themselves. So I'm curious, Quinn, what advice would you offer them on designing trials that are more inclusive of the entire population?
It's a great question. And I will really leave it to you all to better answer that question. I am just a man that's working in DC trying to improve the policy around what you all do. I will defer to our great participants here, but I would just encourage you all. I think it makes sense. I think it makes sense for a more diverse population to be included in terms of what comes out of these clinical trials, right? If we are really trying to study a diverse market and effects on different sections of our population, increasing that diversity is going to be key to really getting the answer to these trials. So again, I don't have a great insight. I would defer to you all, and would love to hear more truthfully, and more insight would be always helpful. So
We appreciate your thoughts nonetheless. We know that every bill faces its share of challenges. What kind of opposition has this bill encountered so far? Are there specific concerns or criticisms raised? And maybe some thoughts on how the office is addressing them.
absolutely. Fortunately, unlike most bills, I haven't seen any opposition to this outwardly. There seems to usually be stakeholders on both sides on certain bills, but we have had a lot of good support around this one. Nonprofits such as you all, clinical trial researchers such as you all, pharmaceutical companies have come to me and said that they love this. They want to see more diversity. They want to see more participants in these trials. I think the biggest uh, I guess barrier to this passing and becoming a law, and oftentimes we face in Congress is the cost, right? What would this cost the government to exempt these folks from this reimbursement, or the exemption of the taxes on the reimbursement? I think in conversations with our committee staff, they really like the idea. I think they see a need here to increase the access to the trials. I think that their main concern is the slippery slope nature of kind of carve outs on gross income taxation. Um, you know, I think again they broadly support the idea, but see any carve out in this space as a slippery slope to other ideas that could be carved out of gross income taxation. So, we haven't faced any opposition, which has been great. I think just answering those questions has been the focus, and gaining support, right? There are 435 members of Congress. There are a lot of voices and a lot of bills that come before us each and every day. So as much support as we can get from outside groups such as you all, for members here. And one lasting impression I hope to leave upon you all is to, go out into your communities, go out to your congressmen, voice your opinions. We'd love for you to support the bill in conversations with them, their alliances to their constituents and to their district. So it is their job to listen to you all as to what Congress should be doing. And we'd love to be a focal point of that.
Yeah, that's a great call to action, Quinn. I appreciate your thoughts on the matter. If I could get one clarification on that slippery slope opposition, uh, could you give me an example of where that concern is, where that could be applied, where maybe a representative wouldn't be comfortable with it?
Yeah, that's a good question. Off the top of my head, I can't think of an example where there could be a carve out for another entity. I'd have to check back with committee and see if they have a better response to that. In addition, it also reminds me, I think the tax world is a big focus here in the House right now, with Tax Cuts and Jobs Act provisions expiring in 2025. So a lot of the tax world has been caught up in that recently. Obviously, it provides an avenue for other items to be considered, which is, I think, a positive for us. But one response I've gotten from some others is that, there are other items that they're focused on, so that this just doesn't come to their forefront initially. It is our job to bring it to the forefront and push it to the top of the totem pole. So that is another piece that I will mention.
I hear you on that. Well, this has been an excellent conversation so far. I'd now like to invite my colleague Sarah to join us with some questions from the audience.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks for a great discussion so far. So I think we'll start off with just kind of getting into, we have a few questions about other people that would be qualified for the tax exemption. So I think you already mentioned caregivers. And so this would include caregiver stipends as well. And would it also include healthy participants who serve as sort of controls for clinical trials?
It's a good question. I believe so. I believe any participant in a clinical trial would be exempt from that taxation. Oftentimes we make laws and give a little interpretation to the agencies that implement them. So, I think one of the jobs that I'm going to have here in the coming months, we are going to have discussions with CMS as to, if this policy were to be implemented, what would that look like? What would you consider as exempt from the taxes? So I believe that would count. We haven't laid it out specifically within the bill. Interpretation is key here, but I think after our conversations with CMS and folks in that space and the agencies, I think that would shed more light.
Yeah, that's great. And so just kind of going through some of the other questions folks are asking, are you considering other incentives to encourage folks to participate in clinical trials? Because, well, certainly the taxation aspect is a barrier. There are other barriers in terms of missing work, and the cost of travel and staying in hotels and things like that. And while they're compensated by clinical trials, perhaps not enough. So I don't know if there's a next step, like a future bill, or other things that they're considering.
Yeah, absolutely. We are open ears. Again, a lot of the ideas and policies come from folks like you all who, bring it to our attention, right? I don't participate in any clinical trial research or provider aspect on my end. So very open to ideas here. Hussein mentioned it earlier, excited to see the Bouchon bill move as well. So there clearly is an appetite in Congress to increase access and participation here. I think, in collaboration with outside groups is super important to developing some ideas going forward here.
Let's see what other questions folks have. Oh, this is a good one. What would success look like for the implementation of the bill? That's that's always great. Follow through maybe in a couple of years. Where would you see it going? So do you have targets for increasing clinical trial participation, perhaps in rural areas, or trial enrollment and diversity location, and the like? Yeah.
Yeah. I think rural is a great mention there. Our focus in the healthcare space has largely been focused around rural this Congress. Chairman Smith, the Ways and Means Chairman, his number one priority has been increasing access to rural healthcare. And so I think, piggybacking off those ideas and seeing the disparity of healthcare when it comes to settings such as rural has definitely been a focus of ours, our office, the chairman and the committee going forward. So I think that could certainly be a pressing aspect as we go forward here.
Yeah, that's great. So would there be set metrics or things that you would look at to say revisit the bill in a couple of years? How effective was it, or like I don't think it's a provision of the bill yet, but I don't know if there's a follow-up plan.
Yeah, I think, one of the easiest things that we can do here in Congress is require reports and studies from agencies as to what the bill and implementation of the bill actually led to. I think that is an easy inclusion in any policy and certainly one that, we're happy to consider as we go forward here. Because you're right, I think, passing it is obviously the main goal here, but the effectiveness of it is what truly matters.
All right, that's great. And so now a more specific, I think, policy question. Do you see this being packaged into the Cures 2.0 effort, or still being a part of a standalone bill, and sort of the future of that as well?
Yep. Ongoing conversations. We work very, very closely with those offices. And I think broadly we are on the same page here. I think, working out that nuance and what a package looks like is the hard part and something that is certainly in discussions. Obviously everything in Congress kind of comes together around an end of year package. So as everyone fights for their priorities and inclusion in some vehicle that passes here, the Senate and signed into law, that is the focus and gaining that co-sponsorship and getting that support and working out the details around that. So As you all have probably seen, it has been pretty hard to pass some things here in Congress. So, I think attaching two vehicles is what makes the most sense. The first focus obviously would be getting it through Ways and Means Committee. We always try and take that step before any House floor vote. So we'd love to see consideration before the committee, actively ongoing in those discussions too.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's how the sausage is made kind of process that I think will be exciting. Hopefully, it gets included in the end of year process. And I think a few other questions folks had is how can they help to get more co-sponsors on the bill? So perhaps if they think this is something that would be interesting for their congressperson, how would they promote it?
Absolutely. That is the number one focus that I hope you take from this conversation. As I mentioned earlier, each congressperson is the representative of their constituents, and it is their job to advocate on behalf of policies that their constituents care about. I am happy to share any staff lists, any emails of staffers, just getting it in front of the congressperson or their staff is super important. That you hope that they would co-sponsor the bill, explaining how this bill would really impact this community. You all know it from your work on boots on the ground. And real stories like Harley Jacobson's story go a long way in advocating for policies such as these. If you can attach a story to it and a real life example, it helps tremendously. As we hear about bills all day and have a lot to sort through. But if you can really concisely, kind of illustrate that into a story and the impact that this bill would have in fixing issues like that, it goes a long way. So I encourage you to reach out to any local representative that you have, flagging this bill for them. I am happy to send along any helpful info or resources in that manner. And just gaining that support and traction is going to be so key here as this Congress begins to wrap up.
Thank you very much for that response, Quinn. It looks like that's all the time we'll have for today. So again, thank you, Quinn, and thank you to the audience for your thoughts and participation. Before you go, please take a look at the link in the chat. We hope you can join us next week on Friday, July 19th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. The African Ancestry Neuroscience Research Institute will join us to discuss their work in increasing the diversity of neuroscience research. Ancestry-associated genes have an important impact on mental health, yet only 5% of neuroscience research subjects are from underrepresented populations. This limits the application of research into a variety of diseases, such as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. We look forward to an informative and interactive discussion with a panel of speakers. Thank you again for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you soon. Have a great afternoon, everyone.